I am pleased to be joined tonight by Kevin Mitnick from Los Angeles. Mr. Mitnick, nice to have you with us.
Oh, thank you, Maria. It's great to be here.
What experiences you can tell us about after all of this time and notoriety for hacking? How have you gained the trust of companies to provide them with your services?
Usually, well, I gained my trust through my background. Since I've been, released from custody, I testified for Congress. I had several clients. I'm pretty much in the public eye, and fortunately, businesses are coming around and they're giving me the benefit of the doubt, and it's great to have that change. I mean, my life has completely made a 360-degree change since 5 years ago.
What made you change, turn around, and decide hacking is?
Well, hacking has always been wrong, and I knew that, and I regret what I've done in the past, and I'm trying to take my past and leave it behind me, and using my skills, my knowledge, to help businesses and people protect themselves against the threats that are out there, because it is a dangerous world.
When you were banned from computers during your probation, following your release in 2000. When you finally logged on again, what shocked you the most? What was the first site you visited?
Well, actually, I had my own talk radio show on a Los Angeles station, and my show was all about the internet. So it wasn't shocking to me, because I would sit behind my producers and they would surf the internet and I would watch them. So the internet was really no big surprise to me, but the commercialism of the internet, back in my hacking heyday, if you will, there was no such thing as Google, CNBC, eBay, Amazon. All those things did not exist. The internet was so new that that no organizations did business on the internet. It was all educational institutions, universities, military, research organizations, and such.
How did you even get interested in doing that? I mean, I was reading in the book that you hacked for the sheer thrill of it. You just wanted the break-in, not to steal money, not to steal secrets. How did you first begin with this hobby, and was it hard to stop?
Well, when I was a young boy in high school, I was very interested in computer technologies and telephones, telecommunications, and there was a group of kids that were at my high school, and I wanted to get in there. I wanted to join this group. So I started, my first hack was a dare. They had dared me to hack into this large corporation's computer network and get access to this particular system, and that was the first time that I engaged in that activity. I actually accomplished it through a technique called social engineering, which is what my book is about, and that's when I first got into it. It was really for the thrill, the intellectual challenge, the pursuit of knowledge, the intrigue of being somewhere where I shouldn't have been.
So when you first got in, you knew you were doing something wrong?
Well, yeah, of course. I mean, it's a no-brainer. You don't think it's that wrong, but you know that you should not be there. I mean, it's like trespassing on a neighbor's lawn. You shouldn't be there.
You've had incredible experience. I mean, going into jail, coming out of jail under pressure from the FBI in the early '90s. You fled. You took on new identities. You worked during a 2-year manhunt. How were you finally caught? Tell me about the experience of being caught, going to jail. What was that like?
Well, the reason I ran is back in 1988, I went before a federal judge, and the prosecutors had told this judge that they would have to place me in solitary confinement, and that it was the only way to protect society, because if I had wanted to, that I could somehow launch nuclear weapons by whistling into a telephone. And the judge, surprisingly, agreed with the government, and they put me in solitary confinement for 8 months. So when I eventually was released, I ended up fleeing, and I became a fugitive. And in 1995, I was caught because there was another security expert that was able to help the FBI identify my whereabouts, because the FBI was ineffective at finding me, because I was pretty adept at covering my tracks and creating identities, and I worked legitimate positions, not under Kevin Mitnick, but under alternate identities to support myself.
And how did you do that? How did you get all the alternative identities?
Oh, I know how the system works. There's for example, there's the death record method. If you can find a person that had died, that was born in a different state, and they were at a sufficiently young age, you can simply apply for that person's birth certificate and become them. It's a very simple method that is well known.
And when you just mentioned earlier being able to tap into the computer system and unleash nuclear weapons, you said it as if you didn't. You're saying that's not true. You're saying
I mean, that's ridiculous. I mean, that's the movie 1983 movie War Games. I mean, it was absurd that any intelligent human being could believe that somebody can make a telephone call and whistle in the telephone and cause a nuclear strike. I mean, come on.
What was the reaction to you in jail?
In jail, I was respected for my intelligence and by the other inmates, but at the same time, I was disrespected because I didn't do it for money. I didn't try to steal money, so they didn't respect that, because the people that you're with in custody, they're into stealing money and property or drug dealing and committing crimes. That's their lifestyle.
Mr. Mitnick, please stay with us. Thank you for your candor. We will slip in a break, and then I want to ask you about the big picture. How vulnerable is the United States to a massive computer attack by terrorists? We'll also talk about the hacker attacks on his own website, the subject of our quote of the day. Stay with us.
At Philip Morris USA, we understand that people want to know where we stand on important tobacco issues. On our website, you can find out. For example, we agree that there is no safe cigarette. Cigarette smoking is addictive and causes serious diseases including lung cancer, heart disease, and emphysema. The only proven way to reduce the health risks of smoking is to quit. For more, including links to sites that can help smokers quit, visit philipmorrisusa.com or call for a copy of excerpts from the site.
Welcome back. We're back now with Kevin Mitnick, perhaps the best-known computer hacker ever, who now has a company that works against malicious hacking. Mr. Mitnick, let's go back to let's start at the national level. How vulnerable, in your view, is the United States to a large-scale computer attack by Al-Qaeda or any other terrorist group, for that matter?
Well, I think the threat of cyber terrorism is quite overblown, but at the same time, I have specific knowledge of our telecommunications infrastructure, and when I was a young kid, I was able to compromise telephone companies throughout the United States. So if a terrorist group wanted to interfere with our telecommunications, I believe it is possible. Will they? Are they interested in disrupting our economic standing, or are they interested in doing some sort of terrorist attack of symbolism where they're, blowing up buildings and stuff like that? I think it's more the latter. But I believe where all businesses are vulnerable, including government agencies, universities. It's all depending on the computers that they're running and the procedures they have in place, their security processes.
So what procedures should be in place? What is your advice to companies or individuals out there trying to protect themselves from cyber attacks?
Well, I think it's a mixture of people, of processes, of technology, of security awareness. For example, on the technology level, it's essential that companies be vigilant about patching, keeping their operating systems up to date with the latest fixes. Firewalls, having a proper configuration not only of their firewalls, but of any systems that are attached to the hostile internet. Using antivirus software, using intrusion detection systems, authentication, not using the static password, because unfortunately people are not that imaginative when they're picking their passwords. So there's different types of devices out there that use time-based tokens or smart cards that ensure authentication. That is, that the person is who they claim to be.
You say you have intimate knowledge of the telecommunication system in this nation. How did you gain this knowledge?
Well, back before I was involved in hacking, I was involved in phone phreaking. And phone phreaking was kind of hacking the telephone system, and this was back in the late 1970s.
Oh my goodness, phone phreaking! I had not heard that term before.
In fact, did you know that Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak were phone hackers before they built Apple Computer? That's how they funded building Apple, was by selling blue boxes on Berkeley's campus.
So what's the point of phone phreaking? I'm sorry. What's the point of it? What are you getting out of it? It's just the thrill of getting involved in other people's lives?
No, it has nothing to do with the human being. It's just the telephone system was amazing. It was the technology, the being able to pick up a telephone handset and call somebody around the world. It was just, as a kid, it was just fascinating. As an adult, I'm still intrigued by the system, the new features of the telecommunication systems, but at that time, that was my interest.
What are the threats that the government might be facing in terms of tracking its own people?
Tracking, you mean its internal moles and intelligence agencies?
That's right.
I mean, that's a serious problem. I mean, look at Aldrich Ames, look at Robert Hansen. In fact, it was kind of interesting because Robert Hansen ran searches on his own name in the computer systems that the FBI uses for investigations. And that should have been a big clue to the people that are in charge of auditing the FBI's, I guess, I don't know what the system is, I forgot by now, but in charge of auditing that particular system.
Now, what about your site? Were you surprised that your own site was actually hacked into? How do you avoid that? How did it happen that hackers actually got into your site? If they're going to hack your site...
You really want to know how to avoid it? Don't run Microsoft Windows. But but besides that is
Why not run Microsoft Windows?
Because it's a very buggy operating system, and it's there's so many vulnerabilities associated with it that it's relatively easy to hack into any Windows system. The people that set up the Defensive Thinking website, it was set up prior to my termination of probation. I wasn't allowed to use computers, so I had some volunteers set up the Defensive Thinking website. Eventually, a few months, as soon as I was off probation, that website that was supported by volunteers, they didn't keep it patched. They didn't keep it up to date. They weren't vigilant. And a person who goes by the Monkeyer Bugbear had found a vulnerability that wasn't patched and went in and dropped a file or put a file onto the website, didn't deface the website, but then announced it to the media. So then I went ahead, because I was allowed to use a computer, I fixed the vulnerability, and then I decided I don't want to have to deal with that because I'm too busy supporting our customers. I don't want to have to deal with a website that wasn't even connected to our internal network. It was just a standalone computer system. So I used a hosting company in Kentucky to host the website. About a week later, the hackers had compromised that web hosting company and did deface the website, but I had no control of it because it was an outside company.
Amazing. What about the issue of privacy? In this environment after September 11th, people are worried about the government spying on ordinary citizens. I mean, how do you control that if it's so easy to get into people's computers? So you're laughing at because
there is no way.
Right.
You have no privacy. Get over it. That's Scott McNeely's quote from Sun. I mean, it's true. If you are leading a law-abiding life in the United States of America, you have no privacy. Anybody can get your social security number, your mother's maiden name, your address, your telephone number. It would take all about somebody with access to the internet, a credit card, and 5 minutes of time.
Are these companies trying to improve their security? Is Sun Microsystems doing anything about it? Is Microsoft doing anything about this? You say that it's don't use Microsoft Windows.
Well, they are. They're making efforts. Now they're taking security more seriously. Before it was interoperability and functionality, and hopefully companies will make it a priority. It depends on the market. If consumers demand secure, software that doesn't contain a lot of security holes, then the manufacturers are going to meet their customer needs. If not, then they're going to continue to release software that contains vulnerabilities that people will be able to exploit.
Mr. Mitnick, it was really good to have you tonight. Now I know we all have no privacy. Windows, Microsoft, Sun Microsystems quote. Wow, very enlightening tonight. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Kevin Mitnick, author of The Art of Deception. Good luck with the book, founder of cybersecurity's firm Defensive Thinking.